answer also memang itu saja.
Oh, all right,
Langsung.
we're about to
Tangan
get started.
seperti ngatso ta zada go jara watni ngatso lesa ta longtong na le ka sa kini longtong ngo nda wo chi te ngo tro che sare.
So we are in the chapter 25 of the text of the Science and Philosophy of Indian Buddhist Classics. It's titled Analysis and Insight here. In English, Hatong in Tibetan, and we are in this section where we're talking about what is the essence. What is special insight?
Jamais gomser ngatso jitsaware, jamais gomser jiata semu pal tembozo atre tembozo amate jamais njvitsena batso yanche mago ani ko gakin tso choni meon te maze lisem la devar le nikanga yamanchewa tenji gtse chigla leti gomjani gerimbo kasi de to tenji chigla leti jamais to parez ni jitsare ta te janan jikrevesina tegin jikomar landong gom gorez ni bat shemu yore.
So in the previous section we talked about achieving shine or calm abiding, and it's a mind that can stay single-pointedly on an object of concentration, and you can stay on this object of concentration as long as you want without effort. And in the state of staying on this object without effort, in this state of concentration for as long as you want, you also have this sort of special pliancy of body and mind. And the special pliancy of body and mind is like it's described as a serviceability or like a sort of a happiness or a joy of body and mind in that. But you can't stop there. Stopping there is not enough. You have to go on and develop special insights.
So tani jani gomni mupachikla jani ta ko nimachini gomja nimani sum gomja kate japto na to yoreta mupa poyondi ko jan gomgani shon ro yore ro mupata ko mupachik to maja jamba savlo to na ya gomjani main ka te chano tati mupachik to la jajim bingani jamba samlo ta na tanda gom de ti de deva thavlam dala ranto go tang thavlam de ter.
So how can get on the mikpati
tombo jani joti de la mupa mchini jawoti ta mupa ni pas zoyondi jani me gom main ba chano ro ta mupa te la tembo japingani ta ni pachi sambachi tsena yang ko taran de de mupa mala bingani te pa jander che.
So when we talk about shine, this calm abiding, this is the idea that we can stay on a single object of concentration for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, as many days as you want, as long as you want. But in the context of shine, if you go to another object, you've lost your concentration, you've lost shine. But so what we talk about with special insight, which you develop on top of shine, is not only are you able to stay on this one object of concentration, but without losing that focus, you're also able to take in other aspects and other objects in that concentration as well, without losing the concentration on the first object.
Langtongze lakpan po kenal de lakpan tonga zeor jerne len tongse lakpare in sonza jerne ngani koramu paching thoni de re mato ni pasamba tsizati kolandro langtongoni mu pachik le dejim bingani lakpan tongo yo langtongze gres.
So the Tibetan word haktong, which is like gets translated as special insight, if we translate it literally, means something like seeing above or seeing more. And so there's the literal understanding of it. The etymology is that in calm abiding, if I say shine, which is the Tibetan term, I'm very used to it. What I mean is calm abiding. If you develop calm abiding, you can only stay on this one object. And so Hlatong, which is the special insight or this like seeing more, the reason it's called that is because not only do you stay fixed on this one object, but you can also bring in other objects, other aspects without losing the focus on the first object. So you have this idea of Hlatong, which is like this more seeing, to translate it very literally.
Lanton job zena carre ta ngaso gomgiani tanji kepachini lanton jobi zena carre zitita ngaso nabye mupachi le savlo ta on di jamba to sabo menjo chandro ro tate jane mupachi le savlo tani ta jamba ramandra le savlo mombo tani to so seri tani ta tingani kepache to atanji savlo tani ta kepache on di parishi gom de malani gom jambingani gom jambingani kepa mombo che to res kepa mombo che wala teni parishi yanjo Lisep Shaganga Tangenzin yang jo ngema reception yang de tangenzin de yore vezina yore de ti gang liang reception yang de wa chabar wa le yores o tanji lebi ti zayon di tani lanton top zeni ke shengdu.
So what is the method of achieving special insight, or how can we understand if we've achieved special insight? What does it mean to achieve special insight? And so what it means is that, so when you achieve calm abiding, you're focused on one object, and as you practice the special insight, then you're able to bring in other objects or other aspects of that object, look at different aspects of that object or other objects, and you do that without losing clarity and without losing your focus. And as you work on that and are able to sort of go between these different aspects or these different objects, then you will develop again this sort of special pliancy of body and mind. Now in Shine itself, you've developed this special pliancy of body and mind, but you actually develop it again, and there's sort of a second wave of it becomes stronger when you have special insight, and this is when you've achieved special insight.
Laso tenita ti tinji yimbi khon de lan do de gonjer ta jaga ka lo poshin da pani ka lon chi chandu ta tonda ta ki sia ta ran re lon de dan Geshe Lharampa tani gonrum ga lon chi chandu gonrum ga lon de Karzena, Matsu Jane, dans longtemps zone de quoi, Kachewa, the Shing to Pena, Matsu Jane, mais pas Kepache de Nanjiko Marivezina. Te long jab de Nang Marme Nangeres, long you did the Marmet Barde Orita, Waya Pole Mares, long the Pakawi Jane Gom de Ores, a Marmet Barde one, a Marmet, Sibochi Mena, yon Sipochato, Marmet, Sibochi, which the Lanton Gom de Ores, Marmet, what on the Bachim Gormukina, my nature. That was a Chuchu, Chimato Mena. That is Jane, you can me pat out. Kokorum Pachil, oh, the song that Nika Chevat, Gora Parmanisondu. To the Gondretation the Bani Long, the Tandalanto Torsetari, Young John Deshiam.
So we can take the example of a candle to sort of explain the relationship. There's a couple quotes in here that talk about this in the text. We can use the example of a candle to explain what we mean by special insight and calm abiding. And so special calm abiding, which is what we achieve first, is the idea of you have a candle, and if you have a candle in the wind and the wind is blowing, the candle's not very stable, and so the candle's flickering, right, and it doesn't burn very brightly because the wind is blowing it. So the attainment of calm abiding, or this really advanced state of concentration, is like a candle with no wind, where the candle bright is able to burn very steadily and very continuously without moving. However, when we think about special insight, what we understand is without special insight, you have a very small flame, right? So your candle doesn't have a lot of power. The development of special insight is like having a candle flame that gets very strong and very big and very bright, right? So that's one way of understanding an example that's used to explain the relationship between calm abiding and special insight.
So the Tananga took a sound long you been on the Marme Nangeres, much huge Gichogiani Shipatembo Mepache, to change to Soyako Nimache at the Lamsan Gendro at the Tanjamanda Chunguri. And in Gashi Shirab Chembo Yore, Sebo Window, and Shirab Chembo to Sotanji, the Solajane may be king. Yeah, Tembo Shirayo, Gendro, and Lamsan Gendro, what the Yungo Sonsa, the Nimayon, which is the Jalazondra beyond the.
So right now our minds are very much like this sort of fire, this candle in a wind, right? That they're getting blown all over the place, right? That we don't have a lot of control over them. They're getting blown all over the place. Now, some people might have strong minds, strong abilities to think, and that, that gives some power to their mind. But there's still, most of us, we're all really, our minds are being blown by the wind, so we're like a candle that's sort of flickering all the time.
That's what Tani, Tati Ranton de Gatsu Techetani, Taj Ranton said that Ketani so Muki Tangin Zanganalma do yores, the Chet Zetita, Manchitumera, Tatangin Zanganalma did do your Lamdo, and they do ton the carresiti, Namkia Chena, Janeta. Taran Tangin the Yenze or Sam John on Tangin the Yenze or it, Lanton de Sosotopi Shira, Sam John on Shira Reze or it, Tangin the Ganalma, Diton Carresina, Ta Tangin the other two Mupalace, Tembo Yong, Tangi Sam Guccelli Teo Sonta, Ashira Teon Tembo Zotati, Ani Tangin the Marco Janeta Lantonica, Tanda 당인 생각나마 두바이 연스 베카를 yarnduzena 신직을 로만자만자 mambo나 자와 신동 지 투데와 드니 베 야르 니 손도와.
So we can talk about both calm abiding and special insight as being understood to be contained or subsumed within concentration. If we look at the six perfections, it's contained within concentration. Understanding why calm abiding is contained within concentration is quite straightforward, because calm abiding is concentration is a mental factor, right? And it is in calm abiding is a special type of concentration. So that's very clear. But if we think about special insight, well, special insight actually is a type of wisdom, right? It's a type of wisdom that's differentiating aspects or the characteristics of an object, right? So why is that considered part of concentration? Well, because this type of special insight, this type of concentration only occurs within the context of this very specific type of very advanced type of concentration. And so because of that, it's considered to be part of the thing is in, like, it's considered a type of concentration, in the same way that, like, if you have a tree and the tree has many branches and roots and leaves, but the main body of the tree comes back to one place, right? So that in that sense, you can say that both special insight and calm abiding can be understood to be sort of part of concentration.
That's what happening. Tani dawo chirita gomba kar chetser zedita ke gom kar chetser zedita lantong zeyat kar chetser tinal malle gore ta ke gom zediat kats ke chetan kar zedita natso mubu nisir te shi gogres ta tonda karina denjik mundu senite ya pochi shi gogre mato gomchi pojani dedena tanda mupaschi le jadena jikamares mupaschi le jani landong teni ke panjamanda sinin denjik mundu ke pache yondi ta jnerji gomna ko jinari manjina soso kar sablatan telekom ni dedena jikra ni haga kaishwe ba kasaluma nani
So we're going on to the next section that Joachim. So why is analytical meditation important here in the English? I think is probably what that title's translated at. The importance of analytical meditation, right? So why do we need analytical meditation? Well, analytical meditation has the power to sort of differentiate things. Most importantly, to differentiate sort of what is good from what is bad, or what is helpful from what is not helpful. And so in the context of sort of calm abiding and special insight, right, just the ability to stay on the object, you have just the object appearing. But what you need really on top of that is the ability to distinguish aspects of the object, to understand aspects of the object. And this is why, just briefly stated, that the analytical aspect is important.
Chana jin chapo chani de yores roa chana jin chapo chatin chapo chaya to zota de kan chaozi da nyomo shoko le chata hakwa
like the
chata choka ngara me na chachi zota chi zota kon chapo de de na zo sim de tri chani da nyomo chol do chaje da control to zo chol kyoni da chamse ta nije la songol tuni kyoma to ta zo de yores ti chela Jarne gomba ta chamela chana shi chamela chatin garachi chik dona zo ta jamba chi zo lila poyora tenin chi rezi ni majorita ti
Jakime ninga to disengi jakime the subcha the gyoro jogi lila bochake
lila nga zo sem de chana ji cha de ti jarne gomba de chamela sana ji chana rezi ma te ji
So Geshe made an example, I guess, in the last class. I wasn't here, that this idea that the mind, we could say, is like a metal. It's like a sort of a lump of metal, and calm abiding is like putting that lump of metal in a fire that then makes the metal workable and pliable, right? Because in our mind we have all of these afflictions, ignorance, anger, jealousy, and we're very accustomed to these afflictions. And what we need to do is, it's very difficult to turn our mind toward things like compassion and love and virtuous things. So calm abiding is like this sort of fire that you put the metal in the fire, and that makes the metal pliable, workable. So we can think of calm abiding like that.
lam tamcha ka sawa thoma tapa gumbala teni tapa ningo tsini tepa thoma tepa ningo tsini tepa ta jamjo ta ningo tsini yungu yore ta tanda nga so jane gomni tapa sanji chote ni country chilu gomni tapa sanji chote ni katape jane ngol sabo shuchi shani ta ngoni ji yo ni ji so sabo shari ondi ta tela mupa tele tenjambi ngani tela chimbi yo te chutam chang ngonson na topi ishi tengres tsewi yo de sangi semcha tamchal so punan je tsewa ta tengres ani na tanda ki yo ten sa zambo semcha sani ta peshi zambo gyacha zeni tenji yo ta kun zibo shi yo sara o tenji go yo den chabar che yo re sami tenji sawlo mambo ta ondi ani kol te pahle ya rangshim ke te pahle yo re
and so when we talk about
so Assembly get you Jagora, get you Jala, not so number in the non-big
and so when we talk about in terms of becoming a Buddhist and understanding like the sort of the process of becoming a Buddhist and practicing to become a Buddhist, right? The first thing we have to develop is faith, right? We develop faith and then renunciation and refuge, right? So in the process of developing faith, we really have to understand the characteristics of the objects of faith, like the objects of the Buddha, so we can understand, right, the great qualities of the Buddha. And through that, then we're able to sort of think about the qualities of the Buddha over and over again, and generate faith in the process of a sort of understanding and becoming a Buddhist.
So, ko dingar thamcha te pombi ngopa monde chinke kanza chi re zeondi ta so sawlo chi tanda so ndo chi na teri de pon chi na sani kangi talo yak pon chi na lo jimal kangi ta tanji chi ni kora jab ni thamal shenro gore ta ngem gana le semo se ya chala ndo chi so chawndi o ta tili karni ta sanji shakya ta patin chi toayu na ta chi che gosari sani teli ya sawlo teli ya ganon ta chornon ta te Chendon da shuji leon go te pa zegri te leka kari na tomate gogri aso leka chetanwach
so if we think about a being that has achieved what we call the truth of cessation, which is the Buddha, it's the being that has finally gotten rid of all afflictions and all suffering, right? So if we think about it being like that, and then we look at our lives, and some days we're happy, some days we're sad, sometimes we have like we might be happy for a week or a month or something, but then sooner or later, sadness, troubles arise. And we know if we think about it, that this is going to happen over and over again, right? That we're never going to have a stable and lasting happiness. And then we can think about the qualities of the Buddha, right? Someone who has truly eradicated all of the afflictions and has a stable and lasting happiness. And so through contemplation, through thinking about this, we're able to generate some actual faith, some devotion toward the Buddha through that process.
Pena yarmochi kate shiri yopa nga so shigo marta nga so ko yonde chimboji ba ha ko lo sonsa khishia ta songa so chi gyantum na nga so le pendo kore samni samba chungri tenanj ta ba sanji choden di koron tenji go dinga tamcha tan chawi chutam chen kenge sanji ko mo top sarti tenji go sanji ko mo tombi tablam de ke koron nyani jayo marma sanji songa na ma song de ta ta so lo gyon chen nga so tenanj ji cheto na ngaro chole ya tarbachi toya yosare tarbachi togure tenji yungure sambi sanjeli yeche cheni sanjeli ya rewa gyawya tal jamdro zegre jamdro sena ngo koro jamdro mo rewa yenla.
So when we think about study and practice, we can think about our own study and practice, and then we can look at someone like His Holiness, who's done an incredible amount of study and practice, who's someone that we're able to really see, and we can see the incredible qualities that His Holiness has. And so you can think about that, and through that helps you generate some sort of faith in the path and the practice. And then you can also, from that, think about, okay, well, if you keep studying and keep practicing, you can become like a Buddha. And a Buddha is someone who's taken the study and practice as far as it is, and it has gotten rid of all the afflictions, gotten rid of all of the suffering. And so you, through this process of sort of analyzing and thinking and understanding, you can see how through practice and study, you could actually arrive at this place where you can really greatly improve yourself, and you can arrive at a place where you have eradicated totally all of the afflictions and all of the suffering. And so through thinking like this and understanding like this, and then in your mind, you develop this desire to get there. You develop a genuine desire to free yourself and to reach this place. And so really, this is what we talk about is taking refuge, is this really developing this faith and this desire to achieve this liberation from afflictions and suffering.
손자 단다 나초 페나 미케타와 지그 레카르 지지소나 페나 레카야 본드 징도나 오 레카트 치나 알 케산 쳔보 요세레스니 제와 쳔보 지레글레 제와 쳔보드코 텔 캠조 당다가 나추 캠조 당치 바레라 테니 코 텔 케산 요바하 코티 텔 가나슈 지레그라 오트리 치티 레카 케타와 지나야 텔 가보요 당 텔 제와 요와트 니파트 고레무 가보야 메 제와 야메나 레카 케타와 지체나 제토 마리 나추 체나야 치바레 제와 당 제와 당 토나데메나 티타와니 레카 드로그마
So when we think about even just like a job or something, if you're looking for a job and you see a job and you get very excited about the job, you think that, oh, this job is going to bring me great benefits. You'll work very hard to get that job or to achieve that thing, right, in our normal life. And so this is the same. It's the same with this, right? If you look at the Buddha, or you look at the goal of becoming a Buddha, and you develop real joy and enthusiasm, real desire to achieve that goal, then you will work very hard toward that goal, right? In our normal lives, if we have a goal but we don't have actual desire or enthusiasm to achieve that goal, then we don't achieve the goal. So it's exactly the same in Buddhism. We have to develop we have to develop this this sort of joy and the hope for the goal.
Also teni sonza nanchu sheondi te pata kyamjo goreze te tere mato jemba gemse jemba ta hako mundu yana te pata kyamjo ze at nanchu ngo sare mato te mujin ra ochi kyoni mara ta so lekan china jewa ta ta gamo ngo zu atre lekan mushi te jeni cheni ro goro o teni ra ochi chate ore teni
So when we think about faith, and we talk about faith and refuge, and so in terms of Buddhism, this sort of faith and refuge is really sort of the door to being a Buddhist, to practicing Buddhism, to coming into Buddhism. And it's the same way as in like a job or work or anything you do. You know, if you don't have enthusiasm or joy for what you're doing, or desire to achieve, you know, the work, then you're not going to get anywhere. So in this same way, you know, we need faith and refuge for Buddhist practice.
Sonta ta jamba tepal chechu chikar shege oreze tinga so uti chula tepa ya pochena kertang leka chiwa chi maimba kertang leka chil gamu ka chi cheni te na ya leka nguji chi malena tramre chi le ayo maro ina ya chu goni shena tepal thmo maimbi chechu chikar shege oreze ngoni toni logic se chi ka tepa ya poyona nga so riksen ro chi la rikse zeni nam ge tin ji tan ji yor ndo na tsele na ranjing go semla chu koston ro hapti ka le yo tan ji yo pa ye che ore pena ji ta mela ji pa lo chang mar pa tem bi tsena ta lo chang mar ba ko de po chang jang ta ni ya po chi che o mare lo jong ya che ro ma che chu ya song ro ma che ni ma ta ba le kan ro so nga ge ge che ko le kan ro so se ka le chang jang ja ni Koti dujum rawo tagan samru chile onde ni lama ma chi she onde lamsa hapti koro sama shi de ni rawo shi nga so na ji lo mo mo jo ma ko ni kai shi shin ro o ten ji ke chu ya to lami ta pa chela breze ni ti she so chi
lami ki ta pa ti rang sing ki
te pa ya po yo to so lami ma so onde kanga hapti ka so shi ni yang jo nga so na ji lo ni lo mo bo ja mo ko ni ma kai shin rawo dawa chingi chike ko tambo lamas langoni anchu ta dawa kashi mo ga yo samare ni ku gom ja ro sho ni jel ta jando so da tenji te pal to mo mai ba te ye che che
hope they going to be I think you hope they going to be
so ma te shi dro ni ro
so when we look at what is the sort of the special feature in terms of faith in Buddhism, because we talk about you know, we faith about other aspects of our life, but the special feature really of faith in Buddhism is this idea that when you have faith in the three jewels, you have this sort of spontaneous effort, the spontaneous energy to achieve the goals. There's the example of Marpa and Milarepa, whereas Marpa was Milarepa's Lama and teacher, and he was every day he was hitting him, beating him. He wasn't teaching him really Buddhism. He was sending him off to go to work. But Milarepa, because Milarepa had such great faith, he just spontaneously, he was really able to keep working, and through the great faith in the Lama, then he received the sort of the blessings of the Lama. So really the point here is understanding that sort of faith in Buddhism, if you have faith, if you develop faith or trust in the Buddhist path, in the three jewels, you'll have this sort of naturally arising enthusiasm and sort of perseverance for the path.
Also, what did you the Tepa that Tinije? So, Landongoni, Saulo Dandandra, can Tepa Yongo go to Gense Chekan Saulo Matani, Tepachego, or Reserve Maricoli, Yundingtoni, Tepachegore, Jeva Jacket, Gense Chekan Mine, by my Saulo Mombochitani, that Basangi Chodenite, Lila Pochim, the college. Sangi Chodeni, the money on the Chempoli College, Jamna Yungus, and is so Samlo Chitani, Jamdrochi Chena. And that's also Topishira Kapachi Chini, Camdrochina, Camdro Tembo Chacarilla, Tepayan Tembo Chacari. Temato met some sink of Saltini, Chilia, Tepache, Mat, Chajikachi, so some of the town site 20 minutes ago.
So with the getting it so, that's what the
Tepache Gores,
that's what the Hatungi, that's what the Sangeki, Yundin, Tepachina, the Te Gune, the Yundin,
Tepatan, Camdroya Boyong.
So if we want to sort of tie this back to special insight, right? Special insight is this mind that has this ability to sort of distinguish characteristics and things like that. So if we have a strong mind and we're able to look at, for example, the characteristics of the three jewels or the Buddha, right? And so through seeing the characteristics of the three jewels and the Buddha, seeing their good qualities, right, seeing them with a strong, clear mind, then we're able to generate really strong faith and refuge in the three jewels.
Adani Jambake Pakarche Gorezitingazo, Nimjon Zeat Namba Sangi Bichanana, Tapata Candro Yonani, Nimjon Gome at the Kechemushure, Nimjon Gogore, Nimjon Zeataka Sangi Jodeni Tarbato or Sangi Combotovas, Tarres, the Goni Tarres and Tarsat the Sauno Tangore, Tarsat the Sauno Yapot on the Tangos on Corvinis and Nyavata Yetata Tendrota, Nyavata Yetata Suchamontona, and Natson Tondi, Mita, Tendrota Sola Chictata. Roa, Tachi Kashi Shuchi Deki Yosayanayo, Kosokangin on Ronde, and Saporita, Mikobono, Tenjita, Tendro Mamota Sotakangin on you, Ian Barita. Oh, some at the Yamsuchim, which you can knowledge. Chesandra, Mandraga, meetings are
So another place where this idea of analytical meditation or analysis is really important. So we've talked about how analysis is able to help you generate faith and refuge, right? But there's also this idea of nijung, which is translated sometimes as renunciation, or this sort of is a conviction to arise from samsara. It's a conviction to emerge from samsara. Right, and so you can look at the Buddha and you can see the good qualities of the Buddha, and you think about, oh, I want to achieve that, right? But so you want to also understand what is it that you're trying to get out of, right? So samsara, this cyclic existence, right? So through a discerning mind, you're able to understand what is cyclic existence and why do I want to get out of it. You know, we look at the sort of the 6 types of beings. We look at all of the different types of suffering that we undergo, and we know that. We can see that that samsara, our existence, is like an ocean of suffering, and that over and over again we're going to continue to have suffering. And so through sort of a discerning mind, you're able to work and develop this mind of this conviction, this mind as a conviction to arise from samsara.
Also, answer quite the tender, Gui Dingar Samloyani Yanti Yapochi Tantoni Moni, Kangichinats of Hondus and Nisosomoni, Tatarbatori Sam. Pavshichi go is Saulo Tamal and Koi Dingar and Gonzay, Pochicheto, Porangasonavia, Dingati Dingar Tangons Cheto, and you dinner Taka, the shade dinner to Somonza Gemato, Latini, Tesam Reva Jamilandro.
And so it's if we really wanted to achieve liberation and develop a mind that really works, is enthusiastic for achieving liberation, we have to really understand suffering. We have to understand samsara, and we need analysis to do this. Normally, we can understand sort of basic suffering very easily, but the suffering of change, and this the all-pervasive suffering of the three types of suffering, and the suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and the all-pervasive suffering, right? The suffering of change and the suffering of pervasive conditioning, you really have to sort of think about and understand and analyze to appreciate these types of suffering, and then through that generate a mind that is enthusiastic toward achieving liberation.
Ngaso koa te gyamso tawlo pe long ni ngaso mi chi ti nong le sawa ta ti takani chisen ramen ra ga zatlo che ne pe te gya wo tinga sawnlo chi ta ngaso tanda de te ore chi dan ro chi me no shar de ore ta ngaso takal ngaso lo no pa che ni ta ma khang de ore long par ta ngaso na sa ze de na sa ze de ta ko yin na ngaso gyug ni ngaso za cho cho chen tan ta ma ta na sa tam ba yin na re ma na re zu pu no ni ngaso zu po kanga chola ta ni ngaso dinga no jan ta ma se ja ka ore so
you can imagine, we talk about the ocean of samsara. So there's sort of an example. You can imagine that you're in an ocean, you imagine this giant ocean that's filled with crocodiles and alligators and just horrible monsters, like they'll eat you, right? And you get dropped into this ocean with these horrible monsters, these crocodiles, right? You're going to immediately work very, very hard to get out of that ocean, right? It's going to be terrifying, right? Well, this is exactly our situation in samsara, right? We have these bodies, and there are things that there are countless things surrounding us that are going to harm our bodies and our minds, right? So all kinds of illnesses, sicknesses, everything, right? So we are just like this person that's been dropped into the ocean filled with crocodiles or alligators or monsters trying to get out, right? So we really need to sort of think about this to understand that and realize that.
Tenji samlo mambotani ngaso tanda ga ni tanze deat ngai nari jamba inari ta koala ni pisenche tsama ni tanze ata han sawa ga kyopo chindu tan de richili tartab chi yona ni par tangi tartab chegin ta sanji shakya ta pagati tartab yore son yo sonsa teli tartab chi ni par te chegi sambe ta pe mi chi gyamsu na na zawti chantal pa tondo ka samlo yo wa na jing samlo shi chembo chi le ro chena ani ngen jong le zen
and so really through sort of analyzing this and understanding and looking around and really realizing how desperate our situation is, how dangerous our situation is, and understanding, there is this ultimate, there is liberation, there is this ultimate goal, right? And there's this ultimate goal of getting out of the suffering that the Buddha has achieved. And so the Buddha has taught the way to get out of the suffering. And so really through understanding our situation and really feeling like we're in this ocean of suffering, being attacked by monsters, and really having this immediacy of all the time, really wanting to get out constantly, that is the sort of the measure of having generated jung renunciation, or this conviction to arise from samsara.
Otanjigata tardo kulo te shikchembo chikeona ni lam nyamleng chendo ka sablo te yakole gre lam nyamleng ta gansu na long de tzin de chik chamra wot tanda samlo ge chu ta ta ni chi gansu na la za de ona ko ti ta tzin do chi go ro ti chamra wot kar cha de ore se na tanda nga so cha so nyom mong wan de chang de teli gerni cha so nyom mo te so chesen te so chi ta lam nyamleng ge cholo chi na ani tomba ni to pi shi ro ninje chancho ke se ani zopa gomya jamba ta la so pa te so chamate no tarlam te so te cha de ore
and so when we talk about so you develop this desire to arise from samsara, and then you have to actually do this. And so this is by practicing the paths that free you from samsara. So these paths that go to liberation. And so you're in the ocean, you're floating around, you're surrounded by monsters, and you want to get out. And so the way to get out, the path to get out, right, is through practicing what we talk about as the wisdom realizing emptiness, bodhicitta, great compassion, the six perfections, patience, generosity, love, all of these things, right? These are the paths, these are the ways that we can get out of this ocean and achieve the liberation from the suffering of it. And in this idea of the sort of the crocodiles and the monsters, really what you're trying to achieve liberation from are your afflictions, in the karma, right? It's the afflictions that are going to hurt you.
So ta tenji ngaso kangi na ron roya kanga te nyomon ba zo re ze de shegore nyomon bi nang nyomon dikshur te kare ze na ranchin sen da danzen se te tere son de gore.
And so of these afflictions, these horrible monsters, that are in this ocean trying to eat you, the worst one is actually self-grasping and self-cherishing, right? This afflictive self-grasping and the afflictive self-cherishing. These are really the worst of these crocodiles or these monsters.
다치 고 데본지 라마 초파나 칙칙 소요리 다치 치마chen 로마 송 도나 동안잔도 코나도 마 다치 로마 스탄드 다 카운터 가르지 오레지티 간지치네 하고 운동아 저 랑신진지야들 개침보시우라 당자지야들 개침보리 라니 송교쟁이 사블로지레테 개침보로 와제나 아 라니 지번 니바시 데 레몬 니바데 아데 마레테 탄텐드 랑신진지야들 소소 송교체가 지러 와서 나로를 싸워 첨부 제다제나 대체나 약벌이 대마제나 레그 마레삼 대체나 약간도다 약간만도 빼니셔 산지 샤자다 바고 랑신즈 마체니 셈차 탐차 라테와 곰데디 단다 간지 장도스 케케상랑도다 경랑도스 랑신즈 메나 코 경랑간도스 마서 토마메 파니타 파르타 랑신즈 샤타체니 오르 단다 과자데누스 피다치 제니타 교보치니 된다 단다 이만아진 코르니 조테누스 오 티니라 페치롱다테 가르체나 약사레테 하코운도스.
So when we think about the self-cherishing mind or this erroneous self-grasping that's like really sort of that's been with us forever and that really we're always protecting and trying to work for our own benefit. Well, you can look at two examples. You can think about the Buddha and you can think about all of us. And the Buddha, right, who has gotten rid of this self-cherishing and the self-grasping and doesn't have it at all. And you can look at, well, the Buddha, what has that done for the Buddha? Where is the Buddha? Right. And you can look at us who still have a lot of self-cherishing and self-grasping, and you can look at where we are. And so you can sort of compare the results of having self-grasping and self-cherishing and not having self-grasping and self-cherishing. And, from that.
송자 남교 자치이나 상지 조단디 제탄된 지요 바탕아로 소기 제탄된 중 메바다 사보사케 하코레스 송자 티나나 송랑지 라니스진자 치버는데 베스존데 문도 딩게 딤토니 엘란달란 코토존치티 단자 돈치 쪽 친지 랍제 온디 카르라오르스 송자 땅아 소소소소라 랑 친지 제데야다 나사 나진지렌도 와스 소소르 득보 땅야 나사 나진지렌도스 송자 문도 비딩나 참마 되고서 되고요 바다 하코니 다니 zonde tepe jananjinji tani te ranchinzende dani materine zonde ranchinzende sosogo jananji tani lela dala konda zonji telitsipazani tsipazak kontroza kona telitsontraza no chena tela no pachini dani zonde ngite sarme zoya tavshi chegi sambi samlot lemna te peapor.
And so by looking at the Buddha, where the Buddha is and looking at where we are, you can see the benefits of getting rid of this self-grasping, the self-cherishing. There's a quote here from the Lama offering puja, the Lama Chupa, that I will read. Geshe, I read that this chronic disease of cherishing myself is the cause giving rise to my unsought suffering. Perceiving this, I seek your blessings to blame, begrudge, and destroy this monstrous demon of selfishness. And so really it's like this self-cherishing mind, this self-grasping mind, we need to understand is like an illness that's harming us. Or we can also, that's going to bring us a lot of suffering, or we can also see it as an enemy, right? In this enemy that we need to sort of vanquish and defeat.
Also, mepa zogo undu yenayang mepa zozeti zo chochomandu kanji zogo resin o tatin tombani zeatel sang tangores.
So if we look at them self-cherishing and self-grasping and we think, okay, yeah, these are bad, I want to get rid of them, I want to totally eradicate them, well, that's great, but how do we do that? How do we eradicate self-cherishing and self-grasping? Well, the way to eradicate these is through the wisdom realizing emptiness.
Also, tombani topi shirab zeata danzan zeni national mambo chishore danzan zedia samlo tantan de carre danzan zeata samlo chiri samlo tantan de carre resina nga zeata to pe ranzik jon de zona ranzik tapata demba chapata tanya tinjika ndorna ngotan lampata kambata ta sonso pombo ta chashi tsama mayin ke to tsama lwa girde ni yarbon rawo chinga zeachi yona che te zawashu chembochi che teni tel ti che tanda amandale kachi che ni danzang nyomo chang tong tani sheri.
So when we look at the self-cherishing mind or the self-grasping mind, right, which is the to which the wisdom realizing emptiness is the antidote. Well, what is this mind, right? What is this erroneous mind, right? Well, the self-grasping mind, right, is a mind that who takes as its object a self that is we can say sort of independent, a self that is unchanging, that is separate from the body and the aggregates, and a self that's like a sort of a king that's sort of sitting there, unchanging, independent, in charge of everything somehow, but not part of those, right? And so this is a self that then takes itself to be incredibly important, incredibly cherished.
라서 손자 당가서 단정 따탄라고도 니 ዝ폰데 컴반라고 직사블로다 컴바 직단 고달로 바다 몽보이나 컴바 샤무 몽보 요사지 나 제티티 나실라 민라고 저탄라고 직 단전 세테야테 든린지 징아서 나비 요나 샤르데 타틸 집차치글로 다다 pomboningo chigbi tatsar chishege yore ngo tata pa matang khamba mandra matang khamba na ngo tata parwa te da mandra tindi do chik sawlo tang de yore te sawlo tang yodi ta jibcha sawlo tang ta jibcha tsina te za rapan ro ching ma sawlo tang da ta ngo ni zonte ni la pa ngai ni kamba ngai sam ke ta ma ta nga chi yo sam ko ngo chi yo na ngo ni kamba par ta nga ta kan rin ching du sam ni chashi re ni chik ti tarwa kamba nal me yo pa la ba nal ngan du ngo nal ngan du kamba nal ngan du la choko nal ngan du ni ngan du shipa nal ngan du ya na kor pombo kor so ngare du ten ji sawlo chi ta da ra pa chi nga so sabon de chi le nga ta ta se na me ni pa ra pa chi li la won char to re
di nga so ti se man ye ke chi de nga so nuni chne nga so ti pumbo thang tingo chikire di nga so ti rang
shin mare pombo la matu pi raftia vi nga chi yo na shar de gor ngoni na pombo le tu ni tapa sama to yo
ini nga di nga zin de so ti pumbo thanga ti thate 통기래.
타데 제나
kambanang신.
kamba teta ramare kamba nangin chiara ngo taten tonggo ngo chiban tonggo yore ta yana ta tume yimba ngo chiba yimba tani chi shede gor ta tetsen leshi ja kone ka bondu ngo chibi ta ngo tata vi ta ze momo she yora su tu ngo chibi tangzang ge yosara
ngo chibi ka te mi tu be ki ke kam be ki be kai chini kam be
pombo to song kamba nangin chi sa da te te ngandro chi sa ta ngi kanza ta sa yana yang ngazo kambata pombo kambata mini ngo tata reta ngazo samlo nal pombo ta dani ngo tata pat samlo tang yo sama ni la paler mache na nal saya tingi ha ko yo so ta ngo chipa samlo tang yo
so when we look at when we sort of further examine how this erroneous self-grasping, this afflictive self-grasping views the relationship between the self and the body or the aggregates, you can think about it like we imagine, we feel like often that the body is like a house and we're inside the house. However, we also feel like, the body is mine. So I think about, my hand, my arm, my leg, right? So it's not the same as the house because we're not different from the house. We're somehow part of the house as well. But we feel like we're sort of in it and somehow to connected with it. And so what you want to do, just a very rough way of understanding, sort of doing the analysis of searching for understanding selflessness, is to sort of imagine, to sort of hold this image of the self that's like the person in the house, and you start looking for this self in the hand, in the body, in the arms, in the chest. You're looking for this self that you're cherishing. Where is it? And then of course you're going to look for it and not find it because it doesn't exist, right? So this is a very rough understanding of sort of selflessness.
Sonza tendi ni lipon koronzo nga lipon nali nga jingdu mundu tendi ma tsini sawlo tani kepa chewala nga taton sewa ze tan chik chakayore te la tomba ni la kepa che ze tu tendi chire.
So by searching for this self, am I looking for the self in the aggregates, trying to find the self, in your body? The conclusion you should come to is not that there isn't the self, but that the self exists through sort of merely being imputed to the body. And so that's really the understanding. Can you tell me And so through this understanding of searching the self and seeing the self as being imputed by the mind on the body, this is sort of an analysis of emptiness and selflessness.
Otandi sinita pache ondi ngazeatam sina manye pandawach. Rawa ngandra sina manye pag sem de rapandawa yo rapandawa gotsna tombanye tose. Parshi jipcha shiuchi sami travi ne tombanye topa kochogo yor ngatato.
And so through this, like the idea, through this sense of searching for this self, you searching for this sort of imagined self that doesn't exist, and not finding the self. This is a rough analysis. This is sort of a rough analysis to arrive at a sense of selflessness, and so you can take this sort of more and more subtle and really come to understand emptiness and selflessness through this kind of thought process.
Sonza tenji tsia manye pa ha koyondi soso nabgin nga sambi samlo tatan kewandroni nga samyondi tetsa jema pongbon rawo tan nan jata wichin zuzu nga sun ani tina chire mo pa tsone ja nol chmeya nga so jengdo ja jimbo Jason the Janitana Chassis situation, the parties on the Checkamaya and Sotanda Hakongo, or Tendidochi, Sosolia, non-certain issues, she chimbolegore, Sosotia, Pombo, Soya, Sony Gambas, or Najimato Chemea,
and so if you do this process, if you do this analysis over and over again, first you have an idea of a very solid concrete self, and then as you do this over and over again, the way that you view yourself will change, and then ultimately you'll end up with a view of the self that's like a rainbow. You have this idea of the self that has this sort of the sense of it being like a rainbow, and so the way that you view yourself through this analysis should change.
Ranging nga samni ngi chet ze nga ze dia to danzan de shik chongri ro tani ni chik ngal chik la bona nga kontro shita cheza mare ngal love song sampi nga ga samlo de shita meti karo ka china ka dol la na dol nga so shik de na do de chik ba za mare te na so ke la danza ze ya de meti chik ba za mare chik tengal go ndu sambi do chanda go ke mare la jamba chik ya po chene Chato Mare, Tetsu Shoni, Yomungashi Chimbon, Chorin Jogre.
And so if you change your mind in this way, and so if the way that you view yourself then becomes less concrete, less independent, and more like this idea of this rainbow, then naturally these afflictions won't arise so much, right? So naturally you won't have this really exaggerated self-cherishing, this self-grasping, right? So if somebody does something to you or says something bad to you, you're not going to get as angry, you're not going to get as upset, you're not going to sort of hit them, throw a rock at them or something, right? So just naturally through this changing of this view of the self, these afflictions don't arise. If someone else has some good success, you won't get as jealous, right? So just sort of naturally through this process, your afflictions will become less strong.
Omanga Sojani Gomba now Shingata, the Tombanye Landong Satelam Batsati, then you load the tembo, Chenita, Tonsan Rangungolejani, then you gom Jami down the tell, Tombanye Gomze Yorella, then you gom de on the Pashi Tombanye the Sabo Shuji Chanita, Semgumol, Tombanye, bed 20 out in the normal machine, Tombanye most on the toes in it, in the tiny galando.
And so to bring this back to sort of calm abiding in special insight, right? So if you have if you use these very powerful minds, calm abiding and special insight, and so you use that mind to inspect, to understand, to look at emptiness. And so at first you do this through what we would call sort of conceptually, so like a mental image, and then over time you can do this directly, right? So then you have this direct understanding of emptiness through calm abiding and special insight.
Also, authentically gomi on the Tombani Tobishira, the Yaji Katin Roa, Danza Chongin Road de Gore, that Chenian Parum Chenin Joy on the Tantamatel Danza Petty, Ginchini, Danza Yaga, Semble, Sawanini, Nasambi, Nelson, Sawanini Mea Chichayo, Reservoir, the Neil and Game John, you're in Game John, the Tombani Tobishira, and the Chachin in the water, but Chancho Kasim, Nijet, such a gomioma, Teniche on the only parish. Yomo Jinchin Road, tell a tarbato was in it. So the Nyantu Taranja Jachum was in the teaching the Chakayo Marta, so Jachum become what it
and so if you do this meditation over and over again over time, and then slowly you'll the strength of this self-cherishing, this erroneous self-grasping will decrease and decrease and decrease until eventually you're able to totally eradicate this erroneous view of the self, this erroneous self-grasping and self-cherishing. And so when you totally eradicate this is what, and so this arises through renunciation, or this conviction to arise from samsara, and then the wisdom realizing emptiness. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the Mahayana path of a bodhisattva and a bodhicitta. And so through this process, if you're just meditating on the wisdom realizing emptiness, and you eradicate it, you finally eradicate self-grasping or self-cherishing, you arrive at the state of a foe destroyer, or an arhat, a hearer's arhat.
나서 더니 다켜서 남자 견들 nga zedia de kawandu samni te zia de hacha kechen bore te no chu nenga shiuji cha de yore nga zia de kawandu zide de parshi so so ujel angoni te zina te chanya mando nga zia de res samsa chi parshi mando asambi so 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 ale kale tombo kepache ni tanda aso lantongoni tobyo marta kepache tobyo ra no sonsa te yai kechen bo chi rin ronan digna lona konsa chokal lavren te katina samlo ta chowa chi rin chin ni te ko mando asmendo te ngaro e chembo ta kasho chi ni chena so so go nazini so so ta chimo chi te de shi chong rin ro na nyomo shi chong rin yam dan ro ta sa porisha ni.
So it's really useful and very important that you really examine this self, how is the self appearing to you, right? Where is the self? Looking for the self and doing this analysis and being aware of it. What is this self that I'm cherishing? Like, where is this self that I'm cherishing? Like, doing this analysis over and over again is really important. Of course, right now we do not have calm abiding, we do not have special insights, but we're still able to do analysis, right? Even though we don't have these specific minds, we're still able to do analysis. And through this analysis, we're able to reduce the strength of our afflictions. And this is really a great benefit. So really, it's really important to just, and it doesn't have to be when you're sitting in meditation either. Really, any time you can just sort of look at your mind. How am I imagining the self? What is the self? How is the self appearing to me? If I look for the self, do I find the self, right? Like this kind of analysis is just something you need to do over and over again for a long time. It's really beneficial.
Well, so tata tana ngeshu de and dem dinal ta yo marita ta nga so so topi london to ne london goni tepa la kepache ani jamjo la kepache nyamjo la ni pache tomba ni la kepache ni tinji kale ya lam gomna so so tharba tom do re timeng nyam ni che re ya ta ngaro te ta so topi london go kepache wala chuni jo ay ma to dem dinal tinji je chandu.
So when we think about the practice of calm abiding and special insight, and so special insight in particular, this isn't necessarily in the book. We can think about the paths, right? The paths of faith. Tepa ngejung, tepa gyamjung,
tombo tepa gyamjo ngejung tomba ni to shira.
So we can look at the four different paths here, right? So we have the path of faith, the path of refuge, the path of this conviction to arise from samsara, and the path of the wisdom realizing emptiness. And so through practicing these paths, we're able to achieve this state of freedom from the afflictions that we talk about as being a foe destroyer.
That's what any that teba mamba chicken yamlin chanchichina, tending jovore. Ta tepa chembu yamlin chevala, the gauntlet nichi chembot on chancho kasemdon, domani tobishira tangim jotati. Timele goya so teaching la goya yimbar on ti gonle teaching la chancho ke sem gom ko ata ni ji chembo gom ko ata tani pyo so paro che chibitri la so pa gom ko ya go nam sha mambo chi yore ta teri nga so ti chon sa mare ten zda chi ma ta lange teaching ko te on dinali yo mar ta chi cho rawa.
So we don't have time to go into this too much detail right now, but so what we described earlier was really just the path of the Hinayana vehicle. And so if we want to think about the path of the Mahayana vehicle for people that have really great faith in the Mahayana vehicle, and so then on top of these practices, this we just mentioned, the practices of faith, refuge, renunciation, and the wisdom realizing emptiness, we also can practice the bodhicitta, great compassion, and the six perfections, right? And this is what then our path becomes a Mahayana path. And we will go into this in detail in the next class. We're going to stop today. here in Chiwa.
Tani choso Chiwan Rayona Chiwa Chinoshota Kamangama.
Sorry, Laura, I just saw your question, which page. I'll try to put that in the group beforehand next time. Problem is I usually use a PDF that has totally different pages, so I don't usually know the book page, but I'll try to be aware of that. So we're going to stop here for the class, but we have about 10 minutes for questions. Anybody?
Yeah, yes. I don't have any questions.
Sonda.
No question?
No.
And then?
Anybody online have a question?
Mayo.
No? Okay.
Okay, T1.
Yeah. Chiwa Chingdue.
First, how do you make sure you genuinely develop the desire to get out of
The
samsara?
genuine.
Yeah.
The ngejung chimo mayim ba kanjis gegere.
Tangin jo chingo maim ba zedia te namje lauran chimbo nongla pe ni li gyang. Pe na zomba chi zongkhang na le tsdena ko zongkhang ge chalo le tendo yore zena yorwa. I tondo ke shikta shikche chong ka ze. Na so shikche chong ka re ze nima ta ka kol ta tarsong na sa samlo chi ka ti na te de gres. O ten ro chi nga chong ko ni tarsong na sa ni nima ta pa ngem jong tanda ko ni thando ke shikche te teni chiklem na ngem jong ke wa re ze ni chik song yor.
I'm not sure if did you mean how do you know if you have it or how do you develop it?
No. How do you make sure you genuinely
Have it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what he answered. Yeah. So there's the example of someone who's stuck in a prison, right? If you're stuck in a prison, you know you're in a prison. Every day you want to get out of that prison, right? You're constantly wanting to get out of that prison. That's what you're working on all of the time, right? So in that same way, right, if you really just genuinely every day you view samsara as a prison, you want to get out, you see the suffering, you want to get out of it, that's the measure of having generated true renunciation or this conviction to arise from samsara. It's that same kind of sense that you see everything as a prison and you're always wanting to get out of it.
Nipa te kari gyaro zina pe na nga chon korwa te kamba metsik nga chon din kamba te metsik dewa na nga chon din kamba na lao dewa na nga chon kari samgari nga chon titi samya chi ayo ma nga kamba chalo le tarto na sambi samlo chi rwa kamba te metsik dewa na kamba te metsik nga chon nalo na nga chon samlo kari tengari samlo tengi chi ma to yo ma nga di chalo tarto na sam te ma to ramada jamba nga ti na le khalang zani lo de ko za temo te go sa tendri damanda samlo chuni chamya inching minching ma chalo gi go samba tendri ma to yo mar so ta nga chon nem jo kya kati na so son kamba metsik na ji chi kana la ni chalo gi go sa na ji ko wi na ni tar go sambi samlo to jokki gondang nyangwa chini nga shishik le dia ta kati yena ta yo ping pa yo mara te ta shikche jong de teni de chi yo na ngem chole pa rezin pechik te gyand.
So there's a second example. If you're in a house and the house is on fire, right? You're not going to be hanging out playing games, getting a snack, messing around, right? You're going to get out of the house and do everything you can to get out of the house. So it's the same kind of idea, right? It's just that in that example, right? Everything you do is aimed at getting out of that house. And so the same way with true renunciation, is that you're not going to be distracted by all these other things, right? And you also it's not just a matter of always having this view, it's also the strength, the desire, if you're in a house that's on fire, you really want to get out of that house. That makes sense?
Tanda nachu ngoni shina tanda ngacho kamba chalo ni metsik de ore tangaro tanda nyen ra ku non kalang ra so semon ra se kepo chin de tendri ro chi she.
So really we're really in a house that's on fire, but right now what are we doing? We're like hanging out, we're having a good time, we're having food, we're playing games, right? But the house is on fire, burning down around us.
Yeah, but we don't realize that.
Yeah, which is why this Geshe Lharampa, this is me adding this, but this is why this analysis is so important, is to make us realize it. The ngatso the ngay lapa kare sa the ngatso tanda hakugi made the ngatso the jegum jegum the ladinegi gumsen. Yeah, that's why this understanding, this analysis is so important, because the way we feel things exist is not the way things exist.
Yeah. And then the second question is, Geshe, I mentioned if you keep practicing analyzing non-self, right? And then eventually you will see self like rainbow.
Yeah.
And then does that why? Does that because rainbow, I think it's rainbow only appeared under some kind of circumstance, right? It's impermanent.
Jatsola peja. Tan jatsola peja. Jatso zediat chardar town, Yemi go town, the Sondra, Mandachi, Diki Tendre Mombo, Chitoni Atra Janjo Chirimupa, Tison, Jatso Zeat, Yomaro, Terin Jatsola peja, Yona, Jamal peja, Jamahakondo, Jamal peja, Nangatu Mandra Standard, Lombo, Mombo Tonga, Timo Tanki, Timungumbo, Bahako, Pacho Tamki, and Mayin Bahako, and not so thing, Jamanoj, and interesting chapter.
So you're right. That was a very good response to your idea. But there's two reasons. One is yes, that the idea that rainbows come about through different causes and conditions, right? And then they appear. So that's one reason, right? That the self is arising through these different causes and conditions in the same way as the rainbow, and also because the rainbow is like an illusion, right? In the same way that the self is like an illusion, right? You can't ever get the rainbow or find the rainbow, right? Like it appears to it arises illusion-like, right? And it's the same way as the self.
Naro Kipachena, Sosolo Kipachena, not the Nitichi Chadi or Jimbo Nojan, Yunjin, a partial to Sipaza Sagadala Kipachena, the Chadi, and this was a Gabuchi Saga Jalandra Wotan, Combando, Tetu Salotana, the Chadi or something.
And so also not just yourself, but you can think about if you're saying someone else is my enemy, right? You know, they are also, you can do the same kind of analysis, or all of the things that we're so attached to that we crave so much, right? You can do that same analysis for those things. And that will, by seeing things that way, then by doing this analysis, all of your attachments, your anger and everything will start to decrease and diminish.
Lasso, Drison.
Okay. All right. Jason. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you, everybody online.
Yeah,